If you have actually used Claude Code for a while, you have probably noticed it's less about knowing the features and more about how you use them. The person who created it, Boris Cherny, ships 10 to 30 pull requests a day with Claude Code. So I spent the last few weeks figuring out exactly how it's supposed to be used by reading Anthropic talks, breaking down his podcast appearances, and testing every pattern on my projects. This video is the result. Today, I'm taking a repo I maintain on GitHub with over 500 stars, and I'm going to migrate it, modernize it, and add a new feature to it, all with Claude Code from start to finish. It's a Python app with libraries that are out of date, wired to APIs I don't have access to anymore, and has no tests, exactly the kind of challenge you face in real code bases. By the end of this video, you will know how to set up Claude on real code bases with CLAUDE.md skills and plan mode. You will have watched Claude migrate a full project and fix its own bugs along the way, and you will have a setup where Claude tests its own code, catches its own failures, and fixes them without you touching the keyboard. Let's begin. All right, let me walk you through the project properly. It is called LLM 0 to 100, and it's a mono-repo with 9 different projects under one roof. And the one that we are migrating today is called RAG GPT. It is a document Q&A system in which you can either upload your documents at runtime or prepare a document store in advance and then ask questions. The system answers your questions from those documents and return them with source references. For development, I used Python as the programming language, Gradio for the user interface, and ChromaDB as the vector database. And there are 2 major problems with the project right now. The first one is that it uses Azure OpenAI and I don't have access to that anymore. And the second one is that the libraries are out of date. So for example, if I open requirements.txt here and search for OpenAI, you can see the current version is 0.28 and it is very old. So even if I wanted to, I could not run this project on my machine right now. And we are going to fix all those issues today along with adding a new feature. But before doing that, let me also briefly show you the project schema so we fully understand the project scope and challenges. This is the project schema, and I'm not going to go into the details, but you can see that the project has 3 main workflows. The first one is the ingestion flow, then we have query and RAG flow, and we also have summarization flow. Ingestion flow is responsible for processing our documents and preparing the vector database. RAG flow is responsible to perform the Q&A, and summarization flow can get a document, for example, a PDF file, and regardless of the length, it will provide you with a good summary of that document. So the first thing that we want to do today with Claude is updating the libraries. For example, Gradio is out of date. Here I'm using LangChain to process the documents, and it is out of date. ChromaDB is out of date for our vector database. And beside that, we also want to fix the API calls that we are making in our project. So you can see I have 1 embedding model here, 1 here, and I make 3 API calls to the GPT models, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So in total, we have 5 different API calls in our project. Before launching Claude, there are 2 things that I always do, and I want you to see both of them. First is activating the virtual environment that I want to use in that session. And the reason this matters is that Claude inherits whatever shell I launch it from, the virtual environment, the environment variables, and so on. If I launch Claude without activating first, it would run, for example, PyTest against system Python, which is not what I want for a project with specific dependencies. And Claude cannot permanently activate a virtual environment for itself mid-session. So this has to happen before the session starts, and we are going to do it. So here, I'm going to open a terminal and see if it activated the virtual environment automatically, but make sure that your virtual environment is activated. And we are going to also verify that when we launch Claude. The second thing that I always do is creating a feature branch for work like this. Everything Claude is about to do, including the migration, the tests, the new feature we'll add later, all of that should happen on a branch that is separate from the master. Master stays untouched until I manually decide to merge. That's intentional because if something goes wrong at any point, mastering is clean and I can throw away the branch that we created and we started to work on. So I'm going to create a branch, which is a feature branch, and I'm going to call it OpenAI migration. And there you go. So if I verify that we are in this branch. So we are going to verify that Claude is going to see both the branch and the virtual environment when we launch it. A quick note before we move on, Claude can actually create and manage branches on its own once you give it the right permissions. And that's how many teams automate their entire shipping workflow. But for this video, I'm keeping the branch setup manual, so the fundamentals are clear, and in a future video, I will go deeper into things like parallel multi-agent runs and fully automated shipping pipelines. So I will skip that part for now, and let's initiate our Claude in the terminal. Okay, so Claude is running. Let's ask about the virtual environment and the branch. So let's see if Claude will be able to see the branch and the virtual environment that we created. So it found the branch. That's good. So there is no virtual environment. Is there a conda virtual environment activated? Yes, conda environment refactor is active. Perfect. So it didn't initially see the virtual environment because it's a conda environment that I'm using. Perfect. So the first thing that I want to set up here is CLAUDE.md file. This is a markdown file that Claude reads at the start of every session in the repo. You can think of it as your project's constitution. It tells Claude the coding standards, the architecture decisions, what the project is, and what it should and should not do. Boris calls this the highest ROI investment you can make when you start using Claude Code on a real project. So let's do it together. I run /init, and we allow Claude to explore the project and create that CLAUDE.md file for us. This command tells Claude to read the entire codebase and generate a CLAUDE.md at the repo root based on what it finds. It figures out the tech stack, the project structure, the patterns in the code, and writes a reference it can use in every future session. And since this is a mono-repo with 9 projects, let's see how much it discovers in the first shot. All right, so CLAUDE.md file is ready. Let's have a look and let's see what Claude found and added to this file for us. So this is just a general description. We have the description of the mono-repo. It's llm/rag projects and tutorials. That is correct. Let me actually change to this mode because that is easier to understand. Okay, perfect. So running projects, change the directory, install requirements.txt, that is correct. We have RagGPT execution information. We have hidden technical debt behind AI agents information. And that's about it. So Claude didn't actually add any information for the rest of our projects. And it also added some extra information for the configuration of each individual project, the environment variables, the vector database, and so on. So this is not great. And I also didn't expect Claude to come up with a great CLAUDE.md file in its first run, because we already know that there are so many information in this project. And if Claude wanted to actually come up with a proper CLAUDE.md, it would first of all take a long time. And actually that is not something that I'm interested in. So first I want to create an individual CLAUDE.md file into each sub-project that I want to work on. I will explain to you why in a second, but let's first give it a prompt and let's fix this file. So update the root CLAUDE.md file so it stays high level and focused on the mono-repo structure. It should describe that this is a mono-repo with the sub-projects. Here I also mentioned that each sub-project will have its own CLAUDE.md for project-specific rules. I included repo-wide conventions for commits and environment variables, and added a branch safety rule to make sure that Claude will never merge the feature branch into master. And finally, keep it below 100 lines, stay lean, and the detailed stuff goes into sub-projects CLAUDE.md files. So what I'm doing is keeping the root CLAUDE.md as a map of the repo. Only repo-wide rules go here because Claude is going to merge whatever it finds in each sub-project folder on top of this one. Perfect. In the next step, I want to give it a prompt to also create a CLAUDE.md for our RagGPT project. Now create a focused CLAUDE.md file inside RagGPT with the sub-project specific rules. And I also gave it all the information that it needs to know about what we are going to do in this session, including migrating RagGPT from Azure OpenAI to use OpenAI directly. We are also updating all the libraries and dependencies. Before making any changes to the pipeline, write tests that verify the current behavior. There are no tests in the project, so write proper PyTest tests as part of any migration or feature work. Keep the Gradio UI functional and keep this file under 100 lines as well. So now we have two CLAUDE.md files. The root one describes the mono-repo as a whole, and the one inside RagGPT describes RagGPT specifically. When I'm working in this subproject, Claude automatically sees both of them. When I'm working in a different subproject, it sees the root plus whatever CLAUDE.md file we have in that specific project. All right, so the one in root directory, let's have a look. So now it detected that there are 9 independent LLM/RAG subprojects tutorials. There is also a tutorial in the project, so that's perfect. We have the list of all. This is exactly what I asked Claude to include in this file. That looks great, and branch safety. Perfect. And just to double check the number of lines, it is 39 lines, which is well below 100 that we asked Claude to create this file for us. Now CLAUDE.md in RagGPT. So it created a general guide on how to execute the project. There are 2 Python commands that we have to execute in terminal for this one, and it also picked up the fact that we can pre-process the documents before running the UI, so that looks great. We have our environment variables. OpenAI is right now 0.28. Target patterns, so it detected the OpenAI library needs to be migrated, key files to migrate. It also detected some files for migration, although we will let Claude to run a proper exploration before executing the migration in the next step. Development rules, type-ins, dependencies, test first, grade your UI, keep the UI functional. This is the project architecture. So this looks great. If you want to make any changes or if something doesn't make sense, you can always modify the CLAUDE.md files. But for now, I'm happy and I'm just going to ask Claude to commit and push both CLAUDE.md files into our feature branch. And while Claude is updating our branch, let me quickly summarize what I did here. So beside having the global CLAUDE.md and the local CLAUDE.md, there are a few different strategies that you can choose for preparing your CLAUDE.md inside your project. So let's quickly go through them one by one. Single root file is what we had initially. We had a single CLAUDE.md inside LLM 0200, which could possibly contain all the information for all our projects. And the problem with that is that this file will become very large over time when I'm working on different projects. And I don't want to do that. I want to avoid having a large CLAUDE.md file in my root directory because that file will be injected into every single prompt that I send to Claude over my workflow. So for example, when I'm working on RagGPT, I don't want my Claude Code to know anything about LLM fine-tuning projects or vice versa. Strategy number 2 has a nested hierarchy for our CLAUDE.md files. The good side about this is that our CLAUDE.md inside our main project stays lean, and we will have a specific information for each subproject. So when I'm working on RagGPT, Claude will pick up all the CLAUDE.md files along the way throughout that project, which is perfect for my use case. And the third one is using add imports, which also works, and it's also very powerful, but harder to reason about scope. Let's go back to our project. Perfect. So our branch is updated. Now we can actually prompt Claude to do the job for us. I need to migrate my project from Azure OpenAI to OpenAI directly, analyze RagGPT codebase and give me a plan. What files need to change? Are there any outdated libraries? What is the risk of things breaking? What order should we make these changes in? And what tests should we write before and during the migration? While Claude is preparing the plan for us, let me explain an important mode that you can use with Claude. Before asking Claude to start migrating the project, I first gave it the context and asked it to investigate and come up with a detailed plan. This is the best strategy before prompting Claude to execute a complex task for us. With this, it prepares a plan, you verify it, and then it executes with a much higher precision following that plan. And all it does is that it injects one sentence telling Claude not to write any code yet. Boris also mentioned that he starts about 80% of his tasks in plan mode. To change the mode in your terminal, press Shift-Tab, and here are the modes that you will see based on your subscription. I'm using Pro, so I have default, accept edits, and plan mode, and that's actually all you need. All right, we have the plan. Let's quickly review it and let's see what it gave us. The project was built against Azure OpenAI. This is the OpenAI library. This looks correct. These are the packages that need to be updated. OpenAI LangChain, LangChain Core, this looks good, ChromoDB and Gradio. So this looks exactly right to me. Source files that need to be changed, load config, chatbot, summarizer, prepare vector database, terminal Q&A, and app config. The only missing file that I see here is the module that contains the user interface, Gradio user interface. And we are going to actually ask Claude to have a look in that as well. OpenAI API key, this looks good. And these are the tests that it wants to write for us for the migration. So everything looks good. The only change that I would make, or the only thing that I would inform Claude, is to have a look in the user interface, in the Gradio code. The plan looks good overall. I just want you to add a proper plan for updating Gradio. It is outdated, and updating the library will require significant code changes. In Lenny's podcast, Boris mentions a good practice is not to box the model in. And here, I don't want to narrow down or shift its strategy significantly, but the only thing that I want to make sure is that the model knows that there is a serious problem in the user interface, and at least it has a plan for it. If it fails, we will figure it out along the way, but for now, I just want to make sure that the model includes that in the plan. All right, let's have a quick look and let's see what changed. So if I go up, this looks great because as you can see, it added a few new modules. RagGPT app is the module that contains the code for our user interface. Upload file and UI settings both are called inside our main user interface. So this looks great. And here it actually picked up some changes that need to be made along the way. So this looks perfect to me. Let's accept the plan and let's allow Claude Code to execute the migration for us. We are 7 minutes in, and you can already see that Claude is changing a lot of code in our project based on the plan that it prepared. And you can also see that it wrote a lot of tests for us. So this looks good. Also, depending on your workflow, if you want to give Claude more autonomy in the execution process, you can give it permissions for executing certain commands. So for example, right now it is asking me, do you want me to just proceed with executing these type of commands without your permission? So I'm going to say yes. And if you check your project here, you can see that in .claude folder, a new file was just created called settings.local.json. And if I open that file, you can see that it added a new section called permissions. And this is a JSON file that over time will be filled with the instructions that you give Claude for this type of commands. One thing to note here is that Claude is changing the code for us and simultaneously running tests in the background. So if a test fails, it loops back and it tries to fix it again, and it won't move on until that test is passed. So you can see here the first one was passed, the second one failed. So it looped back, tried to fix that piece of code, and if I scroll down, perfect. Here you can see that all the tests passed. So now Claude will move on to the next step. All right, the migration is done according to Claude. I also gave it a couple of more permissions along the way. So this file is also updated. And we have the branch in our repo. And if I click on the branch, we can see it's 2 commits ahead of master branch. And this is the last commit by Claude. So if you scroll down, you can see that a lot of things changed in our project. So let's test our project and let's see if it works. So I will just ask Claude to start the application so we can verify the migration worked. The application is ready. We also need to make sure that we add the API key for our OpenAI. Perfect. So let's test it together and let's see if it works. So the UI is functional. Let me write something simple here. We have an error. So there are a few things that I can do here. I can either inspect the error and see what happened and provide some sort of context to Claude Code. I can either run the project locally myself, check the terminal, copy and paste the error into Claude Code, or I can take a screenshot and share it with it. Or I can simply ask Claude to investigate the issue by itself and fix it for us. And that's what I'm going to go for. I got an error in the UI, check the error in the terminal, and fix it. Okay, so here's the app again. Let me close the previous one. Right, hello again. Could not parse server response, syntax error. So I will just copy this one and I will go back to Claude, do a couple of iterations with Claude Code and make sure that it can fix it. In the next part of the video, I want to actually show you when you face such a challenge, how you can automate the whole Claude's workflow to do the task for you. But for now, let me just briefly tell Claude, we finally have a functioning project. It took about 20 minutes and 5 back and forth with Claude to fix the user interface. So let's test it together and let's see how it works. So with that, we just went from a broken Azure project to a fully working OpenAI app. Along the way, we saw real migration, real bugs, and a successful execution. But the important part is that even though Claude was doing most of the implementation, I was still in control the entire time. I was reviewing every edit, asking Claude to run tests, and running the app myself to make sure that the UI is functional. So Claude was coding, but I was still guiding the process. In the next step, I want to push this further. I want to ask Claude to add a brand new feature to our project that touches both our backend and frontend. But this time, I don't want to stay in the loop for every step. I want to automate the workflow. And here's my plan. First, I want to create 2 separate skill.md files for Claude Code. The first one will focus on domain knowledge and include things about our project that are not captured in the existing Claude.md files. The other will handle automation, and explicitly I want to automatically run PyTest whenever a file changes in my project and feed the result back to Claude. That way, it can detect failures and fix them on its own without me stepping in. Next, instead of manually setting up settings.local.json every time that I open a project and I start working on it, for the first time, of course, I'll create a pre-configured settings.json that I can even share with my team that are working on that project with me. This makes it clear which commands are allowed and which ones are not for Claude Code. And finally, I want to give Claude the ability to open localhost and interact with the UI directly. So it can test the chatbot in the browser, verify everything works, and iterate until it's fully functional. At this point, manual testing basically disappears. Let's start and prepare a detailed knowledge base for Claude. Analyze RagGPT codebase and create a skill at the path that is defined here that captures the key patterns, including document processing, embedding configuration, retrieval logic, and so on. Use proper YAML front matter with a name and description so Claude can load it automatically when relevant. Just like preparing CLAUDE.md, there are a few different strategies that you can choose from when you are preparing skill.md files. And these are the 3 strategies that I wanted to show you. First, let me give you a quick explanation of skill.md files themselves. So a skill is a directory that contains a skill.md file, and it has to live inside its own folder. Also, a flat markdown file will not work here. So the difference between a skill.md file and claude.md, you can think of claude.md file as the general rule book, and you can consider skills as specialized playbooks. So when we are working on a specific task in our project, if there is a relevant skill in our repo, we will load that information inside our Claude Code's context. But if we are working on something unrelated, we are not going to load any of that. So with that, we are going to save tokens and give Claude freedom to work on different tasks. So among these three strategies, the first one is good for when you want to have a generic helper across all your projects, and it's not good for specific projects, of course, as you can imagine. The second one is the simplest one, and the good thing about this one is that it can be shared among your entire team. And the third one is kind of the cleanest strategy, but it's a little bit complicated and I didn't need it really for what I'm doing in this project. So eventually I decided to go with strategy B. Let's go back to our code. So perfect, it's already done. And if I open Claude, you can see a skills folder here and skill.md is created for us. So let's quickly see what Claude added to this for us. So architecture in one sentence, configuration, and what else do we have? Document processing, prepare vector database. So these all look good. Embedding configuration, retrieval logic, prompt construction. And as you can see, this is a much more detailed explanation of RAG-GPT. So whenever we want to work on RAG-GPT, Claude can use that information to finish the task for us. Now I want to hook that auto runs tests after every file edit. So the goal here is to automatically execute PyTest, get the result, send it to Claude. It can see the result, and if something went wrong, it can first spend some time to fix that before moving on. So let me give it the prompt here. Set up a hook in this path that runs PyTest asynchronously after every Python file edit. Use async through with timeout of 120 seconds. So these are just some guideline that I wanted to follow. While you're at it, let me actually run it and then let's continue reading. While you're at it, set up the permissions in the same file. So these are the list of the commands that we are giving Claude the permission to execute. And these are the list of commands that I don't want Claude to be able to execute them. And I also blocked all the commands that would allow Claude to merge the branch into master. So I want to have full control on that angle myself. One more thing that you can see here is also pre-allow Playwright MCP tools so I'm not interrupted during browser automation. This is the tool that I want to use that enables Claude to run the UI directly on the browser without the need for manual testing. All right, it's ready, and now let's have a look at the file that Claude created for us. So as you can see, this is kind of similar to what I was populating throughout the whole workflow, but manually. This time I asked Claude to create this file for me automatically, and this file will be shared with the team. So one thing that you will notice if you create that settings.local.json is that Claude will never commit that and push that into your project. But this one, you can already see that it added it to our GitHub repository. So this is good. Let's just quickly verify the content. So we have the permissions here, we have the deny section here, and this is the tool used for our MCP. Everything looks good. Now I want to, create a skill at this path that works as a slash command, and it is going to invoke our PyTest. Let's run this prompt. Right now, let me restart Claude and let's make sure that it can see the permissions and the custom command that we created for it. So here, if I write test, we can see test pipeline appears here. That looks good. And if I write permissions, let's go here and let's scroll down a little bit. So these are the ones that we added in our file. So Claude has access to everything. Let's also double check the MCP one that we created. So this is the MCP Playwright. Perfect. The last piece, I want to give Claude the ability to open the user interface in the browser and test it by itself. If you are not familiar with the MCP servers, the concept is very simple. It is a standard way to give Claude access to external tools. Today, I'm going to use Microsoft's official Playwright MCP. Playwright is a browser automation library, and the MCP wraps it so Claude can control the browser directly. When you want to install it, you can open a terminal and execute this command. If you don't have it, it's going to install it for you. I already have it installed on my computer. And if I scroll down and type MCP, you can see a full list here depending on the tools that you provided to your Claude Code, but we already have Playwright activated. So I set up those files quickly because individually they are just features, but the actual outcome happens when they work together. And we are about to see that in the next step. But before giving the prompt for the feature, let me just run the tests. Everything green, both servers are running. Perfect. Let's start a fresh session and let's pass our final prompt to Claude. So when I have my setup ready, the way that I prompt Claude totally changes. Before that, you can usually give it very concise instructions and ask it to execute, and you have to break down your whole workflow into different steps where you can manually trigger Claude for each one. But right now that we have our setup, we can provide Claude with a full instruction of what needs to be done, how it can test it, how it can verify that everything works, and it can loop over it until everything is actually functional. So I usually provide it with markdown files if my tasks are very long and there are so many different steps along the way. But in this case, since our task is pretty straightforward, I have this prompt ready for Claude. Implement a new feature in RAG-GPT that allows users to switch between concise and detailed response mode, requirements, response mode. So I explained it that concise means our answers should be limited to 2 to 3 sentences, and detailed mode, we provide the full explanation, including all relevant source citations. So these are the two key differences. UI update, we need a toggle in our Gradio that lets users select between concise and detailed mode. In the backend, updates wherever in the pipeline that is necessary and add the code that we need for that. Testing, ensure all existing tests continue to pass and new tests to validate. Concise mode produces short 2 to 3 sentence responses, and detailed mode has extended responses in the output. End-to-end validation. This is where the automated test on the browser come into the game. Launch the app at the local host, switch the response mode to concise, ask this question, verify the response is short, capture a screenshot, switch the mode to detail, ask the question, and verify the response is longer and includes source citations. Again, finally capture a screenshot and verify that everything is functional. Iteration loop. If anything fails along the way, fix the issue. Rerun the tests and Playwright checks until everything is functional. So you can see how step by step I explain Claude what needs to be done and how it can test it. So let's pass this prompt and let's see what Claude does for us. That was it. Claude added the features, all the tests passed, and it tested the UI by itself. And if I open my project, we should see the screenshots here. So it took 2 screenshots to verify that the responses are exactly the way that we want. So this looks great. This is the UI, and we have the 2 toggles that we saw earlier. Let me actually change the mode. Upload a document, for example, attention is all you need. How does attention mechanism work? Let's set it to concise. Perfect. Let's ask the same question in detailed mode. So this time it gave us a little bit more, and also it added the reference. So this looks great to me. Claude did exactly what I asked for, and I almost did nothing along the way. Claude implemented the new feature, ran the tests, and after they were successful, it ran the project, opened the UI in the browser, and tested it on its own. And after it made sure everything is functional, it committed the changes and updated the branch for us. And that's exactly how I use Claude Code on a daily basis for my own projects, which is also fully aligned with what Boris explained in his podcasts. If you want all of these as a reference, the CLAUDE.md framework, every command and shortcut, the full autonomy loop setup, I put together a complete workflow guide you can download for free from our Discord channel.